In 1902, physician Dr. James McBride said, "Man is an outdoor animal. He is what he is by reason of countless ages of direct contact with nature." Today, many city slickers rarely escape the concrete jungle to absorb nature. Dr. Alan Logan is a naturopathic physician who examined nature's influence on our health, happiness, and vitality. He is the co-author of a book called Your Brain on Nature. It is my pleasure to welcome Dr. Alan Logan back to Studio 4 to tell us more, all the way from New York City, close to New York.
Yeah, just outside of New York, yeah. And I really appreciate this invitation back to talk about what I consider to be a very important topic.
See, I have a feeling we should be doing this interview outside in our bare feet.
It wouldn't be a bad idea. I'd be game. It's a bit rainy today, but I wouldn't mind.
What led you down this path, Your Brain on Nature?
It's a good question, and I kind of always had one eye on this research coming out of Japan called Shinrin-yoku, which is basically forest bathing or taking in the forest air. And in 1998, these researchers started looking at, well, what's the difference if you walk in a forest in terms of physiology compared to walking in an urban environment? And then over the years, they started to publish more studies in this realm, all the while showing that spending time in a forest lowered stress hormone cortisol, lowered blood pressure, and other physiological markers of stress compared to the same activity in an urban environment. And it really started heating up, and that's I was like, we have to write about this. But it didn't stop there because there was so much research coming out at the same time, running the gamut from MRI studies all the way through to gardening as well.
So you teamed up with Eva Selhub, medical doctor, and put this together.
Yeah, she's a Harvard physician, and she works in the Mind Body Medical Institute down there. And it was just a nice match for us. And we decided, all right, let's see, what does the science say? And at the surface, you might say, well, why do I need a science book to tell me to get outside into nature?
Right.
In the age of science and technology, when city planners are making big decisions about what happens to our space, we do need science and technology.
Absolutely, and you look at the density and people crying out for more green space, and look at the screen culture.
Well,
our kids, hooked on video games, hooked on computers, sitting on the couch, thumb, thumb, thumb.
It's true, and that's not without consequence. So essentially there's two conversations going on. You've got the screen time, and we've always thought, well, those who have the greatest amount of screen time that are anxious or suffer from a depressive disorder, well, they're only going to the screen because they're anxious or because they're stressed. But new studies following healthy teens for 4 to 7 years have shown that baseline screen time is a predictor of subsequent anxiety and or depression. So we can't write this off, it's just a consequence. We have to take stock of screen time, and then if you're spending all this time on the screen, what are you not doing? And one of the things we're not doing is going out into nature as much as we used to.
And do you think farm folk will live longer than city folk because of this, or not?
Well, there's a few factors going on. If they're being exposed to pesticides and such, well, then the farm folk have got some, things coming at them that might not necessarily be in their benefit. But overall, there is certain data that, for example, a new study just came out in Ontario last week showing it was 500,000 adults from Ontario. Data was collected in the 80s. They just followed them up in 2006. Those who lived closest to green space, 500 meters away, had the lowest mortality rates. This is following up a study out of the UK, one out of Japan, Florida, and one in Hong Kong showing that green space does have a beneficial influence on mortality itself.
So what happens in the brain when you feel the dirt, smell the soil, walk the river? What does the brain look like? And what does the brain look like? And I know we have images when you take an MRI of somebody who's walking on the concrete, going to the gym, takes 2 gulps of air a day. Well, a little more to stay alive, but you know what I mean. All inside, all inside.
There's so many factors going on, but to look just at the MRIs first, the scientists took otherwise healthy young adults, they placed them in an MRI machine, and they viewed scenes of the urban environment or scenes of a rich vegetation area.
Okay, and we're looking at AB now.
Yeah, so what you were finding there is when they looked at scenes rich in vegetation, the areas associated with emotional stability, the anterior cingulate, the area associated with love, the insula, was very active. If you went into an MRI scanner and you were shown photographs of your loved ones, the insula becomes very active. This has been shown time and time again. On the flip side, when they viewed scenes of an urban environment, the amygdala, which is the fear center of the brain, that which is very active in the face of threat or danger, became very active. And it's notable, too, that those with anxiety and depression, as they start to get a bit better, the amygdala activity goes down. So it was quite interesting to see these differences, and they were showing these things really quickly. In the MRI scanner, you weren't contemplating nature. You had 1.5
Right.
seconds to look at the scene, and then on to the next scene, and then on to the next scene. So it's an instinctual, almost written into our DNA, that we would have these type of reactions.
Definitely. So I know a few potted plants are not going to create Mensa members necessarily. But take me to a classroom, for instance.
Yes.
Kids in a classroom, so many windows don't open anymore except in the old school. So
Right.
you're locked in.
Right.
You're locked in the gym, maybe a little recess, so not much fresh air.
It's true, but plants can make a difference. There's research out of Australia, which was just completed, showing that plants installed in classrooms can make a difference in academic grades compared to those in no plants in the classroom. There's also a study out of Michigan where standardized test results were better in those who had at least a view, if nothing else, out to vegetation. But there is a difference with plants, even in the workplace as well, in terms of lowered stress and mood. You're right, it's not going to make a tremendous difference. All these things that we talk about, they're little factors that can, just be a little difference in a given day.
Anyway, being in nature makes us smarter. Is there any link to intelligence?
I wouldn't say intelligence per se, but without a doubt cognitive refreshment. And there have been studies on this now. They take otherwise healthy adults who go through a series of cognitive tests. So you really make them mentally tired. And then they go into one of two different walks. One in an urban park rich in green, the other the city streets. Then they come back to do the cognitive testing again, and memory recall, identification, and other cognitive focus is better after the green walk compared to the city walk. And this has been done more than once now at this point. There's been a number of studies. And that extends as well into ADHD children, where if they play in green space, the symptoms are lower relative to playing in a concrete space.
If you have an ADHD child who doesn't sleep all that well and is very busy, sending that child outside, which parents are afraid to do these days,
Exactly.
mostly.
And that's a big,
I mean,
you're right, that's a good point.
they think their kid's going to get napped on the way to school. Not necessarily, but do you know what I mean?
I do know what you mean. It's a
I hate
fear
to go
culture.
back to the olden days.
Yeah.
But we had to walk to school and walk home, and our mothers would say, get out and play and don't come home till dinner. If you come home early, you're going back outside.
That's right.
No more, in most places, in big cities.
Yeah, you're right, and I think that's also part of it. So we've got the screen culture, and then there's the fear culture where children are not really let outside. And, there's a problem. They're not only not in green space, but they're not able to sort of go out and explore and investigate. And how this comes full circle to environmental issues is because if you're not out touching nature and experiencing nature in the real sense, the research tells us that you're less likely to have pro-environmental concerns later on in life. So this is way beyond recycling cans and carrying an eco bag around.
Right.
This is very important material.
And what about connection? I know in some of the interurban schools in New York and other U.S. cities, maybe in Canada, not sure, they are sending kids out to grow gardens.
Yes.
And then they take the carrots they grew and put them into the cafeteria, and the cook.
Yeah.
I was going to say chef.
Chef. Well, in the higher end ones,
in
I'm sure they're chefs.
North America, it's a cook.
Yeah.
Puts it all together, and they have lunch, and they get it. It's a connection.
Yes, and that is exactly right. I'm so happy that you said that, because that's one of the most powerful ways to connect with nature in all of its forms, including its nutritional forms, because we're also disconnected with where our food comes from. Meat is just like a piece of plastic. When you get young children to toil in the soil and watch the growth and development and ultimately nourish their bodies with it, now we're really making, as you said, that nature connection. And we can't underestimate the value of connectivity to nature. It then feeds forward into well-being as well.
I was thinking in classrooms if they had herbs.
Yes.
And you could eat them, smell them. They say lavender relaxes you, so you're having a tough day with the test and you go up and pinch a little lavender in the class.
That's right, exactly. And all of that material, it's so important for children to experience.
I mean, it sounds heady.
No, it's not, but but this is the thing that gets dismissed, because it's too easy to dismiss this as tree hugging and just it's superficial in the science-based world. But no, it's scientific. It's influencing the young mind in a very important way.
Well, as Dr. McBride said in 1902, we are basically nature, animals of nature, and we need to connect and breathe in and breathe deep. Any of us who have spent time in the wilderness know that.
It's absolutely true, and that's why I'm really glad you opened with that particular topic from 1902. Here we are, a century later, with a lot of concerns with screen time and a disconnect from nature. But it is true. That's written into our DNA.
Right.
There's an affiliation of human beings with nature, and these MRI studies, the studies on green space and mortality, the Japanese Shinrin-yoku studies, they're all proving that there's physiology in the way that we interpret our natural environment.
And tell me about those Japanese studies. That's the forest bath.
Yeah.
What do they do? What does it mean?
Well, it means forest bathing in the sense that you're not literally taking a bath, but you're meant to use mindfulness. You're out and walking a forest trail, or right in Stanley Park, right down the street here. You're in nature. You're being mindful of the trees. Because Canadian research shows that mindfulness is the link between just being in green space and taking advantage of all of its properties, right?
Go ahead.
Well, so they take them out into nature. They typically walk for 40 minutes, and they do the same thing in an urban environment. And the more recent research has shifted to urban parks, because we're all heading to an urban residence at one point or another, so we're told. And that is what they find: lower stress hormone, cortisol, lower blood pressure, and improved mental outlook and vitality relative to the urban walk.
A few years ago, I was in Stanley Park with some hunter-gatherers from Borneo, from the Penan tribe, with my friend Wade Davis, who's an anthropologist. And they were completely sentient, if that's the right word. They were so connected.
Yeah.
They saw every squirrel. They wanted to, of course, eat the squirrels, and Wade said, no. We're not going to eat the squirrels in Stanley Park, not. But you could tell their reaction in there and our reaction, or watching us walk through, totally different.
Yes. And this is why the discussion of screens and smartphones is very important here, because you're going into green space, but you're not there in the true sense of the word, right?
Right.
You're there, but then you've got the text and what have you. The hunter-gatherer is not dealing with all of those distractions. They're really there in the mindful way.
And if you or I go to a virgin forest and sit in the middle of it on someplace on Vancouver Island, it's an amazing experience.
It truly is.
You almost feel the spirit of the trees. A metaphysician once said to me, Fanny, if you want to center and just, get something from a tree, like a big cedar, stand up beside it, raise your arms, and spend time with it for like 5 minutes. He even said it might improve your sex life. I don't know if that's true.
And I won't inquire whether or not it was.
No, I don't think it worked that night. But that said, it's about the connect, again, I say.
That's exactly what it is. It's nature connectivity. And it really is. It feeds forward in so many ways. But the entire conversation takes on importance because as our urban centers expand, it's very difficult to retrofit. Could you imagine if today, with Vancouver real estate, if we tried to devote that much land to Stanley Park? Do you really think that it would happen today?
No.
I doubt it.
No,
Central Park as well in New York City.
And I spent much time in the wilderness, and I lived in Jasper, Alberta, in the Rockies. And when I moved back to Vancouver, it assaults you, the city. The fact that you have stoplights, that too. But it really does. You think you crave connection to nature.
It's true.
The smell, the silence, the Athabasca River, the running water. Let's talk about water when we come back.
Sure.
Okay. Your Brain on Nature, the science of nature's influence on your health, happiness, and vitality. Dr. Alan Logan, our guest.